Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about training our back and back development. And this doesn't necessarily always cover the lower back because, again, this is where things like good morning, reverse hypers come in. But deadlifts can absolutely, for most purposes, even cover that until you start trying to really get elite numbers. But, I get asked on this a lot. People notice my back, and particularly in real life. A lot of times people see my quads and stuff and think, oh, your quads are massive. But in person, it's my back that gets noticed. Again, it's just the way the camera looks. But I get asked, what do you do for your back? And I see people do so much, silly nonsense, such as squeezing and contracting at the top, trying to do lat pull downs or lighter rows and cable work to where they squeeze in the contracted position. And you know what, guys? That's not even really supported at all by the scientific literature. In other words, that contracted position doesn't even build the back that well. And if it did, then all you would ever need is deadlifts, right? We would just deadlift because we maintain better scapular retraction with a much heavier weight. In other words, doing a few reps with 500 pounds in scapular retraction is going to do a hell of a lot more than your little 100-pound cable stack squeezing in scapular retraction. So, with movements like that, we really need the dynamic movement involved. Okay. And that involves, the stretch position at the bottom, within your range of motion. I get sometimes people notice on my pull-ups and stuff, they're like, well, you don't go all the way down. Actually, I do. That's my structure. I have a unique elbow structure and everything else. It's not really that unique, honestly. It's common enough that they make rules for it in powerlifting to where you don't have to have what looks like normal people's lockouts to get it passed as long as you show the judges, right, that this is what your elbows do. Okay. But, I digress. That aside, none of that's ever prevented me from building a massive back. And I've always really lived on, those three movements, right? I've always lived on those three movements. And as I've gotten leaner, it's become more noticeable. When I'm at a higher body fat, people notice the back, but not to the degree as I'm like when I'm getting leaner like this, people really notice. I'm a power lifter, but I'm at a point now where I'm trying to compete in tighter weight classes, in my late 40s. So I got to get lean, plus, overall health. But it makes the back stand out a lot more, makes it stand out a lot more. But, pull-ups, definitely part of the equation. And does that mean only pull-ups, not chin-ups? No, chin-ups and stuff are good. Chin-ups, neutral grip pull-ups, all that's good. But a nice wide grip pull-up, in my opinion, arguably the best lat exercise. Amazing for your low traps, mid traps, all that stuff too. All right, amazing for it. All right. And again, doing the range of motion that you can do. Now, obviously, you need to go to, your range of motion, right? And it's not necessary to get to the top the way people think it is. If you're having to, internally rotate your shoulders to get to the top, you're not working your back anymore. So just something that people need to remember too when they try to go chest to bar. Not everyone can physically do that without really bizarre shoulder rotations. It's not necessary. You're just trying to blow your back up. But pull-ups, hands down, one of the best movements, especially for the whole mid-back. Now we start balancing mid-back, upper back, rows. You see me doing some seal rows here. But again, notice I go all the way down, turn the elbows out at the bottom, right? Turn the elbows out. From this angle, it looks like I lock. But if I were to show you this from another angle, people would be like, you're not locking, but I am. It's my joint. But again, even though I'm doing these from a dead stop, we want to stretch the lats at the bottom, which means we lock the elbows to get there. It's important because you need the shoulder blades to come apart. You don't want to maintain scapular retraction. But big, heavy rows. Now, I like different barbell row variations. I've occasionally messed with dumbbell rows. I occasionally prescribe them. Look, there's a lot of really good rows. I don't think there's any type of row, as long as we have a respectable range of motion, that's bad. They just emphasize different things. But I think rows in general. I like a lot of strict rows. I like things like these seal rows, but I like Pendlay rows even with different bars. Have always been a staple for me in back building. Right? Great deadlift carryover. Also, make sure that you get the upper back. And the pull-ups actually work upper back better than chin, so just something to think about as far as the whole trap and rear delt. Another reason I like the pull-ups, a little better balance development. Okay, a little better balance development. But with rowing, particularly if you're, at that sort of angle where I'm at, around a 90-degree angle, roughly parallel with the floor, we get a good balance between upper back and lats. All right, can build all three heads of the trap, including the upper trap. Builds rear delts, rhomboids. These things get emphasized at different ratios depending upon your back angle and how wide you grip, of course. And whether you use the low back or not depends on if it's chest supported or if it's freestanding. Chest supported could also be like a Meadows row, a one-arm dumbbell row. Main thing, though, again, getting that stretch at the bottom is the most important thing. Don't try to stop and contract at the top. You're going to massively limit the workloads you use through the part with the highest mechanical tension, which is the bottom. So you're going to limit yourself. You're going to get less development. And then lastly, deadlifts. My favorite exercise. Of course, I'm good at it. I have an elite deadlift. Deadlift is my staple. My favorite competition lift. My favorite exercise, a conventional deadlift. But when we talk about overall development, all right, the only studies that have ever looked at deadlift hypertrophy, it is a monster on hypertrophy, contrary to the people who have hypothesis, evidence-based hypothesis as to why it isn't. That's not been confirmed. So people need to understand that that's a hypothesis that isn't really supported by the literature. It's based upon a concept, an evidence-based concept. Well, in the real world, it doesn't pan out. Deadlifts will help build your back. And ironically, people who are chasing an isometric contraction of the back by doing these squeezing, the deadlift would be king of lat and trap isometric training. So much so that look at the EMG studies. Look at the lats and the traps on EMG studies on the deadlift. It destroys all the full range of motion dynamic movements. It destroys it for EMGs. Now, does that mean that EMGs are the be-all, end-all? Of course not. A high EMG response doesn't guarantee that you're going to get better stimulus because, again, we could argue, well, it's not even doing it in the best mechanical position. There's no dynamic movement, so it's going to be limited, in theory, limited muscle fiber fatigue. But it creates a unique training response that I believe, when coupled with these other things, okay, it brings a lot to the table. And with all of it, we have the potential to heavily overload every single muscle of the back with these three movements I've mentioned. All right, this is your trifecta. This will get it done. This will build a monstrous back, these three movements. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.